Now we knew E and we knew A. It was quite easy, but we didn't know B7. We didn't know B7. That was kind of the missing part.
It's Paul.
The other chord, the lost chord. So on we got on the bus, trooped across Liverpool, changed a couple of buses, found this fella, and he showed us B7. We learned it often, got back on the bus, went home to our mates, and went zing, got it.
Hello and welcome to episode 301 of Something About the Beatles podcast. Now, you guys may recall back in...
All right. I just wanted to show you what I'm listening to. It's a podcast called Something About the Beatles. And I started listening to this podcast a couple years ago, and I've been listening to it pretty regularly since then. It's definitely become my favorite Beatles podcast. And one of my favorite music podcasts. The host, Robert Rodriguez, is super knowledgeable, knows everything there is to know about the Beatles. Well, that's probably not true, but he certainly knows a lot. And he's had many, many guests on his podcast over the years. The reason that I'm vlogging about this podcast is that he just had the 300th episode not so long ago, February 26th, episode 300, and he asked people to, send him like a testimonial telling him what they like about his show and what guests are their favorite guests. And so for the 300th episode, he played a bunch of those testimonials from different listeners, and he also played clips from, I guess, episodes that they mentioned being among their favorites. I didn't get a chance to, send him a clip of my testimonial. I kind of wish I did in retrospect, but I guess I was busy with things, so I figured, as the Chinese say, it's never too late. Wang Yang Bu Lao. So I thought I would take this opportunity to just give a shout out to this wonderful podcast. Again, it's called Something About the Beatles, and it's by Robert Rodriguez. And each show he has different guests on. Some are repeat guests, but they're all people who obviously know a lot about the Beatles, know different aspects of the Beatles' history. Some of them know the Beatles personally, so that's always interesting to get direct testimonial from people who were friends with the Beatles or who worked with them or who were their lovers. In the case of May Pang, for example, famously John Lennon's lover in the 1970s. So it really is a wonderfully produced podcast, a lot of great insights into the Beatles, who they were as people, their stories, their history, and their music. I think among my own favorite podcast episodes are the ones where musicians break down their songs, because as much as I'm interested in learning about the history of the Beatles, I think fundamentally it goes back to their songs, right? We want to know the history of the Beatles because of the music. We want to understand how their own stories informed their music, and maybe a little bit of vice versa. I mean, they're interesting characters regardless, but I think primarily, for me at least, it's about the music. So I do want to mention the episode that I listened to today. I tend to listen to podcast episodes when I'm driving back and forth between Kunshan and Shanghai, which I do every week. And today, of course, I listened to episode 301, which just came out last week. And it's called The Beatles' Bag of Tricks, Volume 2, with Jack Petruzzelli and Cameron Grider. And these are two musicians who really kind of know the Beatles music up and down, backwards and forwards. And they were talking about some of the patterns that appear, that you can hear in Beatles songs, such as the use of the sixth or minor thirds. And there are just so many patterns that come out in Beatles songs. But as they also talk about in the podcast, each song is kind of unique in its own way. And that was definitely something that, that's always something that I've known about the Beatles. I've known and loved the Beatles since I was a kid, as anybody who watches this this vlog or sees or reads my website, shanghaisojourns.net, would know that I've been a big fan of the Beatles since I was, yay high, 4 or 5 years old. When I was indoctrinated into them by the Yellow Submarine, and have been a never-ending fan ever since of their music. And when I kind of started this channel, or maybe restarted it last year, I just started posting my own acoustic versions of Beatles songs, and ended up performing and recording 185 Beatles songs. And in the process, as I vlog about in a few other vlogs that I've done, these are all spontaneous, by the way. As you can see, these are unrehearsed, unscripted. That's the way I like to do it. I like to see what thoughts, what ideas flow out of me when I'm, doing these vlogs. But anyway, when I was doing that project, it was just kind of crystal clear to me just how unique musical signature each song has, despite some common patterns, some similarities between the ways Paul writes, between the ways John writes, George. But I think when they're brought together as a combo, those three songwriters, also Ringo, you can add Ringo to the mix, of course, they always manage to create something new, something unprecedented, something that they couldn't have done by themselves. So it was that collaboration. And that's definitely something that comes out in this podcast, Something About the Beatles, where Robert Rodriguez interviews different people about them. There's always new insights to be gained. I mean, I think what makes the Beatles worthy of such a podcast with hundreds of episodes and literally dozens of guests, is that their music is so fascinating. I don't think there's another band that has such a fascinating repertoire and diverse repertoire of music with so many different roots, so many different sounds and influences. Maybe some other bands come close. I've been working on the Rolling Stones lately, for example. But I think it would be hard to do a podcast like this about the Rolling Stones. I don't know. Maybe it could be done. They're one of the bands that I think comes close in terms of their output. I suppose, I'm also doing some Led Zeppelin songs lately. But I think Led Zeppelin has, even though they have great songs, they have kind of a more limited repertoire, I would say. But I don't know if there's a great Led Zeppelin podcast out there or a great Rolling Stones podcast. I haven't really checked out either of those to see if there's a podcast. I've listened to Dylan podcasts and some others, but haven't listened to those. But anyway, I think going back to Robert Rodriguez's podcast, which is kind of the core subject of my vlog today, Something About the Beatles. Highly recommend it. If you're not already a fan of this podcast, you should be. If you like the Beatles, it's really a must listen, and it's just so intelligently done. And every time I listen, I realize, I thought I knew a lot about the Beatles. Actually, it turns out there's still a hell of a lot that I don't know, or that I could get a refresher course on. I'm actually standing in front of my music book collection, and you can see there are several Beatles books here, including this book by my colleague at Duke called Help, The Beatles and Duke Ellington and the Magic of Collaboration. That's a great book to read. I don't know if Thomas Brothers has been on Robert's podcast, but he should be. This book, Tell Me Why by Tim Riley, is also a great one. That was a book that I acquired when I was in high school. And it's kind of a breakdown of all the Beatles songs. And I think it's a very smart take on the Beatles, kind of a no-nonsense take. Tim Riley he's a professor of journalism at Tufts, I think, and he has written many books on the Beatles, as well as other books on music. He's a great resource. Classic by Alan Kozin. If you're just going to read one Beatles book, this is probably the book to read. Alan Kozin, The Beatles. I recommended it to my dad recently. It's kind of like a very very succinct compendium of the Beatles' story and their music and the connections. There's the sprawling biography by Bob Spitz, which was a lot of fun because it gets into micro detail about some episodes in the Beatles' history, especially in their early days. Recently, I did a vlog and a blog on review on this book, Being John Lennon by Ray Connolly. And in fact, it was Robert Rodriguez's podcast, Something About the Beatles, that turned me on to Ray Connolly and his book. And it's really a wonderful book. Ray Connolly was on the podcast, and I really enjoyed his conversation and his insights. He is a man who knew the Beatles personally and reported on them during their career and afterwards. So he has a very close connection to the Beatles and to John Lennon, as he describes in this book. This is a wonderful addition to any Beatles book collection. Some other ones here. All You Need Is Ears, the story of George Martin, who, as we all know, was essential to the Beatles and their sound. They couldn't really have done it without him. He added so many dimensions to the production of Beatles songs and was really instrumental to their success as a group. And the list goes on. I mean, I'm probably still going to collect Beatles books in the future because, I don't know, like I said, it's something that I've loved. It's a band that I've loved since I was a kid, and I've loved also to read about them and learn about them. If you are listening to or watching this vlog and have any other recommendations for Beatles books that don't appear in this library, please let me know. I know there's a whole ton of them. You could fill up easily a whole bookcase full of good Beatles books. I don't know if I'll go that far because I still love reading about other bands and other styles of music. So I don't know if I want to devote myself entirely to learning about the Beatles. That's a little too much. I don't think I could ever do what Robert Rodriguez does, but it's still it would be great to continue to slowly expand my Beatles book collection. So I'm always looking for more recommendations. But again, this podcast does a great job of turning you on to people who are experts on different aspects of the Beatles and provides recommendations of books and scholars to look at and writers who have written about the Beatles. So that's all I'm going to say. Just one more time, a shout out to Robert Rodriguez, and it's late at night here in Shanghai, pretty much in Shanghai, Quinchat, actually, but close enough. But anyway, here's a shout out to Robert Rodriguez. Congratulations on episode 300. I'm going to continue to listen to this podcast and continue to be a fan of what he does and of the band, of course. So good night, everybody.